Thanks, Alan. Welcome to Offsiders. 10 days on from the disgracing of a dynasty, the Melbourne Storm wanders the NRL landscape as the ghost team of Australian sport. As the depth of its shame grows, the team continues to haunt the competition it betrays through the pointless act of winning. On a special edition of Offsiders, we'll examine the fallout from the rather predictable claims that everyone is doing it to the perhaps inevitable newspaper war, and also the less foreseeable, the rallying cry to remove David Gallop from office, and the suggestion this episode will be the making of rugby league in a foreign outpost. If Balzac's dictum states that behind every great fortune lies a great crime, then it could be said behind football's team of the decade was its greatest lie.
Would you please congratulate the premiers in 2009, the Melbourne Storm.
Away, and the team shall not accrue any further points in the 2010 season.
I'm clear. People to make their own determination.
If he's suggesting that everyone's doing something like that, then he's got a lot of thinking to do, and as far as I'm concerned, he's well off the mark.
If anyone's got information, we are always prepared to look at it and to act where we've got proof. But you can't operate on rumour.
So you'd like to see a broad public inquiry, which is what your former CEO has called for?
I think whatever can produce a set of rules that everybody can abide by, that can mean that we really do have a level playing field, that something like this couldn't happen in another club, because it's been utterly devastating to us.
The crowd.
It's a snapshot of the stunning events of the past 10 days surrounding the salary cap rorting of the Melbourne Storm. And our panel today includes a guest panellist, the Chief Rugby League writer from the Sydney Morning Herald, Brad Walter. Welcome to you, Brad.
Good morning, Jared.
The Chief AFL writer from The Age newspaper, Caroline Wilson.
Jared.
Writer and author. He contributes to papers both Fairfax and News, which either makes him gloriously independent or rather confused, Gideon Haigh, and our sports journalist from News Limited, Rebecca Wilson. Welcome to you all.
Morning.
Just as an opening statement from each of you, just sort of the thing that's been most imprinted on you during these events, Brad.
I think this issue has brought into sharp focus the conflict of interest that News Limited has in rugby league. News Limited owns the Melbourne Storm. They own 50% of the NRL. They're the pay TV broadcaster, and if we had an independent commission running rugby league, I think a lot of the side issues to this saga wouldn't exist.
It's implausible to me, Jared, that in any company, certainly not at an AFL club, that a CEO and his underlings could have done this, could have acted alone. I cannot understand how a board, in the climate of suspicion that existed around the Melbourne Storm for several years, or its owners, in fact, could have had no idea. They were either deliberately deaf, incompetent, or they're being dishonest.
The affair makes me wonder what the purpose of salary caps are if they are routinely to be flouted. Is it a bit like having a 30-kilometre speed limit when cars are geared to go best at 60 kilometres an hour? The Storm have been a great club to watch. They've been the most exciting club in the competition. They've played an exciting brand of league that has raised the standard of the competition. We now find that the only way they could do it was by acting illegally. So it's arguable the restriction stands in the way of the highest quality competition. And it's also arguable that caps exist not in order to ensure that everyone is competitive, but that corporate interests can keep costs down and thereby make a profit.
Look, I think the whole thing, if you go right back to square one, is jaw-dropping in its magnitude. And in all the times that I've been covering rugby league or sport, only the Ben Johnson story probably back in 1988 when he was caught cheating with drugs, and the Super League war, which actually completely bitterly divided the game, have been bigger or sort of equal footing. I think what we've got to do is have a good long look at the processes that were in place that didn't work. I think we've also got to have a look at did Brian Waldron act alone? Obviously the answer to that's probably no, given that even his new CEO has confessed that he was also involved. And I think that we've got to open up the whole salary cap debate as far as also bringing in salary cap commissioners, that not just a one-man band and Ian Schubert at the NRL. It's got
The broadcaster, Fox Sports, was he representing News Limited, the broadcaster, the NRL or the Melbourne Storm? But he was present at that meeting as the Melbourne Storm's legal representative.
And Gallup's role is obviously equally interesting, more so. How get a quorum of the board together because of the News Limited involvement?
He certainly had legal, talking about the severity of the punishment. If David Gallup had taken a step back and not imposed the severity of the punishment that he did, then we'd also have the same accusations of the News Limited conflict of interest. So, again, a rock and a hard place, and that's what this entire story keeps throwing up.
Damned if they do, damned if they don't.
That's
and it's
right,
about
exactly.
time News Limited got out of the game.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
It is surely absurd that the NRL board is in quorate in discussions of its major shareholder and its most successful team of the last 5 years, and its media partner, and thereby all decisions automatically default to the executive. That is corporate governance worst practice if ever I've heard it.
If they couldn't make a decision on this because of conflict of interest, how have they been able to make decisions on television deals?
It did leave Gallup exposed to a somewhat strange, or certainly eccentric ad in the paper on Thursday, where there was the suggestion from Gary Johnston, who's a club sponsor with the Canterbury Bulldogs but acting independently as a fan of the game, who stated, "Please reconsider or leave," to David Gallup, and then published an email address for people to flood support for that cause. I'm not sure Gallup's the chief victim, the chief villain in any of this. I think he's acted quite superbly for a chief executive of an AFL, of a football code.
Look, and I will declare my hand here and say that he is a friend of mine, but at the same time, I'll also say that 15 other clubs agreed with the punishment that was handed out to Melbourne. That basically, Gallup was applauded in that first 24 hours for being so sure, for being so fantastic under pressure, and then the worm started to turn, and then Melbourne fans started saying, well, David Gallup's to blame. Well, they need to have a good long look in their own backyard, because Brian Waldron and co were obviously at the heart of what is the biggest single incident of cheating this country has ever seen in football.
I think he needs to act now, and I agree with what you say, Gerard. I think he needs to delve further into every club, and I don't think it's good enough just to ask clubs to come forward.
And they have brought in an accounting firm, or put them on standby for any information about breaches, credible information about breaches at other clubs. The question is who else is doing it, if anybody? And it was raised by the footy show, the NRL footy show, during the week to two club bosses.
You hear occasionally rumours and innuendo, but at the end of the day, we just try and run our club the best we can and get on with life.
I take this opportunity to categorically state that the books here at the club, all the player payments, all the third-party agreements we've got in place, they've been approved by Ian Schubert and the salary cap team, and I would suggest, with all due respect to every other club, that our books are as clean as they could possibly be. I'm not saying they're the cleanest in the game, but we're very, very relaxed with where we are, and our fans should be as well.
You might have expected more triumphalism, wouldn't you, from other NRL presidents on the good riddance to bad rubbish principle. But I think there's a murmur of there but for the grace of God go I, which makes you wonder whether the policy isn't that which they have for gays in the military. Don't ask, don't tell.
It did strike me with Bruno Cullen that he's the sort of man who might ask you to dig half a hole by his...
Yeah, so it was a bit half-baked, actually.
Yeah.
And if you were a Brisbane fan or on the Brisbane board, you'd be sitting there going, I can't believe you just said that. I think this is a really interesting situation, because we've had two cases of incredibly bad cheating in the Bulldogs and the Storm, and each case has required a whistleblower from within. If you don't have the whistleblower, you will not catch the big salary cap cheats. Now, Ian Schubert, the one-man band at the Rugby League, has I think, $3 million over the last 7 years he's fined clubs. That is obviously small fry compared with what we're seeing with the two whistleblower incidents.
Well, you need better investigators, because at the AFL it's happened 3 times in my time covering AFL, Essendon, Melbourne and Carlton, and in none of those cases was there a whistleblower. They were uncovered from the outside.
Brad, is it possible that the NRL still exists in an environment of brown paper bags and cash?
You hear innuendo, but and that's going to be the hardest thing to prove. At least if there's a paper trail, auditors can prove that. But I think there's actually been 3 cases. There were the Warriors. There's been 3 major cases in 8 years, and 2 of them, the Bulldogs and the Melbourne Storm, have involved the setting up of companies to funnel money to players, really elaborate systems of cheating. When they are hard to detect.
Very hard to track. one person.
One of the interesting points that Nick Tabakoff made on the Herald Sun yesterday was that the Storm's accounts seem to be compliant with Australian Securities and Investment Commission requirements, because payments to both suppliers and employees are under the same heading. Of course, it's not broken down how those things are distributed. But if there's a breach, if there are breaches of the cap which are compliant somehow with accounting standards, then there is a limit to what even external accountants can do.
The books added up. The accounts balance. One of the issues that's enabled the Melbourne Storm to do this, though, is the Melbourne Storm earn about $12 million a year. They spend about $18 million a year, which has been an issue with a lot of the other clubs because they actually spend more. The $6 million, it comes from News Limited. They just put their hand out at the end of the year and say, we need $6 million to balance the books. Please write us a cheque. And also the issue with I suppose the fake invoicing, that's just added to the News Limited bill. And if there's a silver lining out of this, it's that perhaps the Melbourne Storm haven't been doing it as tough financially as what we've all been led to believe.
Gideon, your original point about the purpose of salary caps and the future of salary caps, that's going to be raised with the chief executives of the NRL on Tuesday. I don't think there's much doubt there'll be a push to raise beyond $4.1 million a club. There's also a concept now that clubs should be rewarded for developing their own talent. There should be methods of discount, and this was raised in one of the Sydney papers today as a possible solution, given that the NRL operates without a draft. Why should you be penalised with bringing along a player who after 5 years is good enough for representative footy and is worth a fortune to another club and you're unable to keep them? What will happen next?
Well, my view is that we should have a draft. I've thought that for many, many years that rugby league should have a draft, and I think this would have gone a long way towards solving the problems and putting it on a plateau with AFL, which doesn't seem to have the same level of endemic salary cap cheating that we've just uncovered in the last 2 weeks. The second thing is, I think that even under that proposal that you do have point systems and you do reward loyalty, Melbourne Storm would still have come in over the cap. And that is, to me, astonishing. They're still based on a new model of rewarding points and seniority and bringing players on from grassroots. You're still, 500,000 over the salary cap. The last thing we want to see here is a thing like the EPL in England, where only 1 of 4 clubs can win every year because they're the ones with the money and the unlimited spending. And there's certainly elements within the Sydney media who believe it should just be open slather. Well, then you will have 3 teams winning the National Rugby League every year, and that's just wrong.
No, you need teams playing footy, like the Melbourne Storm play, to get more money when you next do a broadcast rights deal so you can pay the players more.
The biggest
it's a
problem,
classic chicken and egg.
The biggest problem with the alternatives is that it all comes down to money and the amount of money that clubs have got to spend, and at the moment they're not getting enough out of the TV deal. And if we can get more, then the salary cap can go up, then the players can be paid more, and then
is it about 25%? Is it like the AFL? Or
No.
Nothing like that.
Nothing
and I think that you'll find that the next TV deal will be the biggest single TV deal the NRL's ever done, and put it certainly on a plane with the AFL, up nearer to the AFL than it ever has been. And also, that's why we need Melbourne, because you need a national competition, and certainly to involve Melbourne, to keep that TV rights value up.
How militant would the players be on this, Brad, to push the salary cap well beyond the 4.1 million? And are there agents considering advising players to threaten representative football as a method to getting appropriate recompense?
No, I don't know whether that's the case, but certainly the players, to a man, I think would believe that the salary cap needs to increase. We've lost a lot of good players overseas. We've got half a dozen players, Sonny Bill Williams, Mark Gasnier, Craig Gower, Carmichael Hunt and others playing French Rugby Union, Craig Wing in Japan. Rugby League can't compete with the money that they can get and the money that even AFL can pay league players like Carmichael Hunt and possibly Israel Folau to switch over now. So the players believe that to keep the stars in the game, the salary cap needs to go up, but for the salary cap to go up, we need a bigger TV deal.
But the other problem with that is that the Canberra Raiders, the Cronulla Sharks, the 2 teams that tend to wallow at the bottom of the ladder year on year, even with a cap in place, can't spend their salary cap because they just don't have revenue coming into the club.
But if the TV deal increases, more money comes in from the club grant. If the club grant matches the salary cap, which it doesn't at the moment, but it does in sports like the NFL.
You certainly have more dollars to spend.
Then clubs will have that money to spend.
OK, to the issue closer to home, the newspaper war that's broken out between News and Fairfax, and if it was unspoken, Rebecca, you spoke it on Thursday in the Herald Sun with a story aimed directly at the Age and then breaking out into their treatment of Brian Waldron. He has undone what was fast becoming a rugby league dynasty by cheating the system at a level never before seen in a football code. So you did make the point that they shouldn't be given oxygen to Brian Waldron. My question to you is, why would you write that story when you open yourself up to the issues of conflict, which you acknowledge in the story that your partner is John Hartigan? You couldn't win writing that story.
No, but I don't sort of go. I don't live my life or work my career to win. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm a person who expresses opinions. That's what I do for a living. I'm no longer in the business of reporting news. I'm in the business of commentating on what's happening around me. I've been doing it. I'm now a journo for 30 years. So I just felt that I should have been transparent in that piece by declaring that John Hartigan was my partner rather than pretending that he wasn't and writing the piece anyway. But I felt very strongly about...
Conflict aside, Brian Waldron was a key player in the story. Every newspaper, particularly News Limited papers, they interview killers. They sent a journo to South Australia to a pub where they interviewed Wayne Carey's drunken, abusive father a few years ago.
Caro, but I don't agree with that form of journalism anyway.
Brian Waldron is not a murderer. I mean, he obviously had to speak. We had to hear what he had to say. And I thought it was a pretty independent, factual report by Andrew Rule, who's a very senior and credible journo. I don't see this as a newspaper war. I just am happy for the Melbourne Storm fans that there is one independent newspaper in this town reporting the story. And I'm not criticising News Limited or you specifically, but I can't see how you can in any way be independent on this, your newspaper, whereas I think The Age has been independent and I don't think we're engaging in a war.
No, I think most of what you've read in the Herald Sun, I think certainly from what I've read in the Herald Sun in the last week, based on the factual analysis, has been entirely accurate. And I think you can't argue the case from either side. I also think, though, that...
But you have argued the case. From one side.
That was in an opinion piece, not in no news reporting of this.
But you've said that you believe that Fairfax has acted with, sort of schadenfreude in dealing with a News Limited mishap.
I think certainly that given that Brian Waldron was trying to shop his story around to get $100,000 out of Channel 7 and then all of a sudden he turns up with a new spin doctor and he starts talking through this source to The Age, and...
He spoke directly to Andrew Rule. There was no one in the middle.
But I will also say, well, the source kept getting quoted, not what Brian Waldron, the source kept getting quoted. But
I think
there's been some misrepresentation this week. Well, I think it's time to be tough on Brian, because I think Brian went off on his third big football gig that he's had in his career, and he needs to be put under the spotlight well and truly.
I absolutely think that has happened in both papers.
We'll talk about Waldron in just a moment. I just want to show yesterday's Age, where they fought back, as you would expect. They rolled out Greg Baum, who's a Walkley Award-winning columnist, and as well as the pillow talk that was raised, he did put the question that was posed in your column is, why is News Limited so desperate to scapegoat Waldron and leave it at that? And then as an add-on to that, I would show you the cartoon from your column this morning of Brian Waldron. If you haven't got the point yet about the chief rat, there it is. It's none too subtle.
No, look, it's not too subtle, but that's the nature of, of a Sunday Telegraph gossip column, that it's none too subtle. But I think Brian Waldron is certainly the person who's come under the spotlight this week. I think we'll find in the next couple of weeks that there'll be other people implicated as well. But certainly you can't sit back, even as a journalist from anywhere, and look at what's happened at the Melbourne Storm without being able to point the bone at one person and point the finger at one person, and that's Brian Waldron, because it appears, and it has been admitted by the new CEO, that he set this up.
That was done very firmly day one. I mean, it couldn't have been more firm when John Hartigan stood up and called him the chief architect. Couldn't have been more firm. 10 days down the track, I think we all have to be looking a bit deeper in this, because none of us, particularly those of us in the AFL who know Brian, can believe that this could have happened without the board or the owner's knowledge.
Rebecca, you're a very high experienced and high profile commentator on NRL. Why did you wait until last week to disclose your personal relationship with John Hartigan, and why do you think you have credibility in defending John Hartigan now?
Look, I don't think that my personal relationships... There's a lot of people in the media who have media marriages, and you don't have to sit up every time you make a comment in the media if you have a media marriage and say, oh, by the way,
But why was it relevant last week and not 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 2 years ago?
Yeah, because I was discussing News Limited, and I just felt, as did the editors of the Herald Sun, that it was only right that I declared that in that piece when I'm writing about John Hartigan and News Limited. Mostly, thankfully, in the course of my job, I have absolutely nothing to do with John Hartigan and what he does in his everyday life, because it's nothing to do, no crossover at all with what I do. But in this case, there is, and Brad discussed that at the very beginning of the show. You know, news is heavily involved in this sport.
The total conflict of interest issue, again.
What's the future of the Storm here, Brad? Caro's indicated, and it's quite right. I'm gobsmacked by the affection being shown to a club that's been revealed as a staggering cheat.
Well, I was at the game last Sunday, 24,000 fans. The atmosphere was fantastic. It was an experience I'm grateful to have had, and I think that this is the beginning of the club, not the end. News Limited have been forced to commit to the Melbourne Storm now long term, which I think is a good thing. I want them out of the game, but if they're going to prop up the Melbourne Storm, that's great. And the fans in Melbourne, if you're a rugby league fan in Melbourne, you don't have to be a Melbourne Storm fan, but if you just want to watch rugby league in Melbourne, Channel 9 aren't showing it down here. You've got to get behind the Melbourne Storm, otherwise there'll be no test matches, no State of Origin games, and you get to see the West Tigers or the Sydney Roosters or whoever you want when they play the Storm.
I felt last week, and I was there too, I felt privileged to be there. It was one of the great rugby league moments that I've lived through, including grand finals and the rest of it and State of Origins, and I also felt that it's the day they got a soul, because they can be accused, and certainly in Sydney, Melbourne's been accused of being a soulless club that's there only for the benefit of TV. But in fact, you just got this feeling from the grassroots fans, all wearing purple merchandise, all wearing caps, that this club means something to them.
I reckon we'll sit here for the next hour and keep chatting, but that's all we're going to put on telly. And that's our special edition on the Melbourne Storm. So that's the program for this week. Coming up next, ABC News and then Asia Pacific Focus with Jim Milton. Thanks for watching.